This video has been sponsored by Squarespace. Tolkien's stories are all about people going out into the world and having these big adventures, which feels a little ironic since Tolkien himself was a lifelong homebody. This is especially true when it comes to the sea. The pages of Middle-earth are filled with sailors, shipwrights, and mariners, entire seafaring civilizations, and yet Tolkien himself was not a particularly seafaring gentleman. His only real voyage of note was undertaken when he was far too young to have remembered much of it, and in his adult life, his greatest exposures to the great deep blue were seaside vacations or ferry trips across the channel. So why is it that most of Tolkien's works contain this sense of sea longing? Why is it that he would write so passionately about something that he has next to no experience with? I think that the answer to this lies, as it so often does, in stories. Throughout literature, water has been an incredibly potent and incredibly flexible symbol, capable of representing both rebirth and death, both power and powerlessness. Water was also long viewed as a barrier between our world and other worlds, and there is much to be said for the people that can traverse or cannot traverse that barrier. And perhaps the reason that Tolkien found this to be such a rich and versatile symbol was the very fact that he had very little experience or understanding of the sea. Gazing out from the shore at the incomprehensibility of the depths, it's possible that Tolkien first discovered the way that longing for something inaccessible, something potentially even unreal, could inflame the human spirit. So today, let's dig into the ways that Tolkien used the sea in his works, where these ideas came from, and how they form the core of longing that shapes all of Middle-earth. But I tell you what, something I am longing for is to tell you about this video's sponsor, Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one website building platform that's going to help you stand out and succeed online. With Squarespace's cutting-edge design tools, anyone with any skill or experience level can build themselves a perfectly customized website. Start with one of their professionally designed website templates or with their Blueprint AI website builder, and use their intuitive drag and drop technology to create a website that beautifully matches your brand and personal style. And with Squarespace's email campaigns, you're going to have all the tools you need to engage clients, promote your services, and grow your business. You can even set up email automations to stay connected and drive growth while saving yourself time, and you can seamlessly integrate your products into your emails. If you're interested in refreshing an established brand or building yourself an entirely new one, Squarespace is the place to do it. Just head on down to squarespace.com for a completely free trial, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/JessOfTheShire to get 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring this video and supporting the channel, and thanks to all of you for checking out my sponsors. Water is used as a symbol and as a plot device throughout Tolkien's works. After all, it is a river and some barrels that save Bilbo and the dwarves from the halls of the Elven King. Gollum makes his home in the icy waters of the Misty Mountains. The river Bruinen, strong and flowing, acts as a barrier between Rivendell and the rest of the world. Water in Middle-earth can be a savior, a protector, a prison, or a danger, even just in the form of a river. But the great vastness of the sea is most present in the Silmarillion, particularly well represented in the tale of Numenor. Numenor was an island brought up in the center of the Western Seas, gifted to a special group of men who had helped the Valar defend Middle-earth against Morgoth, the Evil One. The sea had always been a sacred and protected thing for the Valar and for the elves. In fact, through most of the First Age, no man had ever laid eyes upon it. By gifting a group of men this sea-encircled island, the Valar were demonstrating a great amount of gratitude and trust for these humans. And on this island, the Edain flourished. They learned how to fish for their food, and soon set about building boats. In short order, they had become some of the best shipwrights, fishermen, and sailors in all of Arda. On occasion, they would stop in on the continent of Middle-earth, where the humans that had been left behind referred to them as Sea Kings, for it seemed that they had truly mastered it. But despite their lordly stature, the sea was not entirely theirs. Tolkien writes, "The lords of Valinor forbade them to sail so far westward that the coasts of Numenor could no longer be seen, and for long the Numenorians were content, though they did not fully understand the purpose of this ban. But the design of Manwë was that the Numenorians should not be tempted to seek for the Blessed Realm, nor desire to overpass the limits set to their bliss, becoming enamored of the immortality of the Valar and the Eldar, and the lands where all things endure." Just west of Numenor lay the holy continent of Aman, where the Valar and some elves lived in perpetual and eternal bliss. The Valar, which are the gods of Middle-earth essentially, knew that if the Numenorian men caught even a glimpse of the Blessed Realm, it would never leave their minds. They would obsess over it, and they would cease to see their mortality, which was given to them as a gift, as the gift that it was. They would want immortality. They would want the perfect peace of the Blessed Realm, which in reality would never truly satisfy them. And for a time, this limitation on westward travel was accepted and respected, but as the pride of Numenor grew, they began to turn their eyes towards Aman. And in this way, the ocean, which was once a sign of unlimited freedom and power for the Numenorians, it became the barrier that lay between them and temptation, a barrier that seemed so thin and permeable, easily crossed, which only made it all the more tempting. So it was that the sea became the deliverer of their damnation. Sauron came to them on a ship, and he wormed his way into the heart of the city, and began twisting Numenor inwards, further and further from the gaze of their god Ilúvatar. And when the time was right, the pride of Numenor at its zenith, Sauron acted, telling the Númenóreans to lay siege to Aman, and the Númenóreans, in their pride, obeyed. They took to their ships and sailed west, past the forbidden barrier, and the retribution of Ilúvatar was swift. The soldiers that had landed on Aman were swallowed into the earth, but for those left on the island of Numenor, the once life-giving sea would spill their blood. There came a mighty wind and a tumult of the earth, and the sky reeled and the hills slid, and Numenor went down into the sea, with all its children and its wives and its maidens and its ladies proud, and all its gardens and its halls and its towers, its tombs and its riches, and its jewels and its webs, and its things painted and carven, and its laughter and its mirth and its music, its wisdom and its lore. They vanished forever. And last of all, the mounting wave, green and cold and plumed with foam, climbing over the land, took to its bosom Tar Miriel the queen, fairer than silver or ivory or pearls. The water overtook her, and her cry was lost in the roaring of the wind. Just as Ilúvatar had once raised this island up from the sea as a gift, so it was his right to take it away. The sea then acts as an extension of the will of the divine, or rather, pardon this pun, fluid symbol. For those at peace with Ilúvatar, the sea is a life-giving blessing. It is food, transport, it is home. But the sea can also act as a barrier, a boundary, a warning that although Numenor may have dominion over the sea, ownership is not theirs to claim. And when that trust is broken, so it is that they are cleansed from the earth, swallowed into oblivion by the great wave. Tolkien explained that this vision of Numenor, a kingdom born of the sea and thus destroyed by it, stemmed from a recurring dream that he had, one that he believed had been genetically passed from father to son, as his son also had this dream. In this dream, a great, inescapable wave towered up from a calm sea, swallowing him entirely. Tolkien referred to this dream as his Atlantis haunting, And indeed, the idea of a god using the sea to cleanse the earth is as old as storytelling itself. In everything from the Epic of Gilgamesh to Atlantis, the sea and its flooding has often been presented as a cleansing force, the hand of God viciously deciding who is worthy and who is not. The Bible is replete with references to water. It is life-giving, and it is life-taking, and it is purifying. The flood of Noah and the waters of the Red Sea claim all those but God's chosen people, and God gives people miraculous water to drink in the desert. He turns water into wine so that people may drink. And the waters of baptism, the water used to cleanse the feet of the apostles at the Last Supper, is purifying, and it is cleansing, it is nurturing. Water exists in an interesting place of being something that we require, something that within just a few days we will die without, but it is also something that could kill us within minutes. Its representation in stories, in religion, in myth, and in science is not singular or one-dimensional, and Tolkien likewise refuses to reduce it from anything but the variable and potent symbol that it is. Even the Vala spirit that represents water is quite unique and difficult to pin down. While the rest of the Valar, for the most part, choose to take on a physical form and live together in community, Ulmo is known as never joining their council. He almost never takes on a physical form at all, preferring to move unresting through all the waters of Middle-earth. But in spite of this elusiveness, he is not uninvolved in the affairs of Middle-earth. The Silmarillion says, Ulmo loves both elves and men, and never abandoned them, not even when they lay under the wrath of the Valar. At times he will come unseen to the shores of Middle-earth, or pass far inland up firths of the sea, and there make music upon his great horns. And those to whom that music comes hear it ever after in their hearts, and longing for the sea never leaves them again. But mostly Ulmo speaks to those who dwell in Middle-earth with voices that are heard only as the music of the water. Ulmo utterly defies conventional categorization. He is uninvolved, ephemeral, and drifting, but in that he is omnipresent, always watching, even if he chooses to remain aloof. Just like the sea, Ulmo gives life, and he takes it. He preserves boundaries, and he bears people off to distant, fantastical lands. There is an incomprehensibility to him and his ways that is frustrating and beautiful all at once. You might say that in Tolkien's works, the sea is best described as that thing which reminds people that as individuals, they don't have control. You might sail upon the waters, you may use water to irrigate your fields, you may even think yourself able to swim, but that huge, ineluctable wave will always arise, and there is nothing you can do to resist its immensity. But this aspect of the sea, as an untamable, incomprehensible being, makes those who choose to sail upon the sea all the more important. In Tolkien's mythos, sailors and voyagers hold a special place of privilege. The very first character in Middle-earth ever to come to life was Earendil the Mariner, first written about in the poem The Voyage of Earendil the Evening Star. First composed in 1914, this poem tells of the enchanted mariner Earendil and his westward journey past the sun, moon, and stars. Acting almost as a celestial body himself, bounding betwixt the stars, the Earendil of this poem witnesses marvels that no man has seen before. And so it would be for the iteration of this character that made its way into the Silmarillion, Earendil. Eärendil's father was Tuor, the legendary hero of the Fall of Gondolin, who was chosen by Ulmo to try and save the Hidden City from destruction. Tuor was the very first human man to ever set eyes upon the sea, and he was entranced by its might and its terrifying beauty immediately. He tarried there for some time before Ulmo himself rose up from the sea to tell him that it was time to move on with his quest. But Ulmo recognized the sorrow within Tuor for the fact that he would have to leave behind this marvel, and so he told him, "Yet maybe thy life shall turn again to the mighty waters, and, of a surety, a child shall come of thee, than whom no man shall know more of the uttermost deeps, be it of the sea or of the firmament of heaven." Earendil was this destined son, born of Tuor and the elf princess Eärendil. He survived the destruction of Gondolin, but was left largely on his own when his parents left to go and sail the sea for themselves, never to be seen again. Eärendil, whose name meant sea lover, would also share his father's longing for the open ocean, and he would build himself a ship named Vingelot, with the help of Círdan the shipwright. On this ship, Eärendil cast off into the western seas, searching for his parents. Before long, word came to him of Morgoth's corruption spreading further and further in Middle-earth, to the point where it had reached his wife Elwing, and so his mission changed, and instead of looking for his parents, he tried to sail west to reach Aman, to ask the Valar themselves for help. Thus, Eärendil became one of the very first humans to ever set foot on the shores of the Blessed Realm. He came before the Valar, asking for their help against Morgoth, and they were moved by his plight. Primarily they were moved by the fact that he seemed to care more about the rest of humanity than his own livelihood, and so the Valar agreed to go to war against the Dark One. Eärendil and his ship Vingelot were hallowed and sanctified, and thus they became much like the Star Wanderer of that first poem. Now fair and marvelous was that vessel made, and it was filled with a wavering flame, pure and bright, and Eärendil the mariner sat at the helm, glistening with dust of elven gems, and the Silmaril was bound upon his brow. Far he journeyed in that ship, even into the starless voids. But most often was he seen at morning or at evening, glimmering in sunrise or sunset, as he came back to Valinor from voyages beyond the confines of the world. Empowered by the Valar, Eärendil slays the greatest dragon to ever live, and then returns to the sky to sail forevermore amongst the heavenly bodies, visible only as the glittering evening star. The tale goes that Eärendil will not return until the very end of time at Dagor Bragollach, when he and Vingelot will lend a hand in the final battle. Eärendil takes a very special place in the legendarium of Middle-earth. On the one hand, he is essentially a chosen one hero, a messianic figure, his birth foretold by the Valar Ulmo, and yet his presence in the world is so fleeting. As a being born of the sea for the sea, his role is like that of a wave, crashing powerfully to shore, wreaking ruin upon his enemies, but soon enough retreating back out into the eternal drifting body of the ocean. Someday that wave may rise again, but for now the sea is placid, waiting for its time. I believe that Tolkien found the role of the Wanderer to be a very important one. He once described himself as a wandering explorer or trespasser in the land of Faerie, full of wonder, but not of information. When one is a native to a place, however abnormal that place is, those abnormalities will start to seem normal because they're what you see every day. But the wanderer passing through, looking out from on board his ship, will see those marvels for what they truly are. It is the outsider looking in, the man standing up on the cliff seeing the vastness of the sea, that will always have more insight than the person between the waves. This is laid out clearly by Tolkien's character Eärendil, another great voyager from a distant age. Eärendil came to be in the Book of Lost Tales, and his voyage is the centerpiece that allows its disparate tales to come together. Eärendil is effectively a 5th century British man, so someone from our world, who heard of murmurs of strange enchanted isles off to the west, and decided to take to his ship and sail to them. Upon finally making it to the enchanted shores, Eärendil is greeted by people that tell him the stories of their world, the song of the Ainur, the downfall of Melkor, the song of Tinuviel. Tolkien left this story unfinished in the end, but Eärendil helps draw a line from Earendil, the far-traveling human mariner, to the legendary explorers of the Old World, especially those like Saint Brennan. Saint Brennan, or Brendan, as he is sometimes called, is part of an Irish tradition of stories of voyages to another world, called Imrama. Saint Brendan was a 5th century Irish abbot who became quite popular in the later Middle Ages for stories such as the Latin Navigatio Sancti Brendani. These tales say that Saint Brennan heard legends of an enchanted land off to the west, a promised land, and that he decided to get on a ship to see these sights with his own eyes. He stops at many strange islands along the way, witnessing giant fish, moving islands, and strange birds. He and his crew even get a brief glance at the Promised Land before they return to Ireland. But upon returning, St. Brendan doesn't mourn the fact that he was unable to stay in the Enchanted Land. Rather, he returns home grateful that he was permitted to see such a wide range of God's creation. The Imrama of St. Brendan were less about the destination, or even the choices made by the hero along the way. Rather, they were about the exploration, the marvelous sights, and the ways in which the things that a creator creates can lead you closer to the heart, the goals, and the intent of the creator. Tolkien was most certainly aware of St. Brendan, as he creates his own poetic retelling called the Imram in the Notion Club Papers. Here, Tolkien blurs the line between historical fiction and fantasy, as when St. Brendan goes on his journey, he doesn't see the traditional things, but rather things from Middle-earth, white trees, elven voices, and strange stars. It's clear that Tolkien saw his blessed realm, his western paradise, as the kind of thing that a figure might make an Imrama too. Like St. Brendan, going out into the world and flitting between its wonders, and returning with a beautiful story to tell, so Eärendil and Eärendil and Eärendil went out on great journeys, and were all the more enriched for it. And what better place than the ocean to hide away wonders unknown? There's a reason that medieval maps, which were typically more metaphorically accurate than literally accurate, always portrayed the known world as being ringed by oceans. In the days before satellites and Google Maps, the ocean meant potential. Anything could be waiting overseas, even a land of enchantment. This idea of there being an enchanted land just out of sight, perhaps across the sea, is one deeply embedded into our storytelling tradition. We love the idea that there could be a perfect place, a place without all of the pain, without all of the hurt, a place without death. It may not be a place we could ever reach, but we like the thought that it's there. We have always constructed places, Elysium, Avalon, Eden, Tir na no, in which we can place our longing for perfection and soothe the imperfection that we see in our own world. But as soothing as this hope is, it also comes with grief. Grief that Tolkien coined sea longing. This is particularly acute for the elves, who for all intents and purposes, by the time of the Lord of the Rings, belong in the Blessed Realm. Many of them have seen Valinor, were born in it, have felt its warmth and its peace, and although Middle-earth is enchanting, it is dark and confusing and changeable, there will always be a part of them that mourns separation from paradise. Galadriel best expresses this. She grew up in the Blessed Realm and came to Middle-earth eons ago, but she's never forgotten about it. Pride, amongst other things, keeps her on the shores of Middle-earth, but in bitterness she refers to the ocean splitting her and Valinor as the Sundering Seas. She describes, "Out of a grey country, darkness lies on the foaming waves between us, and mist covers the jewels of Calciria forever. Now lost to those from the east is Valimar." Even the elves who have never seen Aman can find themselves struck with sea longing. Legolas adores the forests and the hills of Middle-earth, But upon the conclusion of the return of the king, he experiences a profound change. As the time of the elves is drawing to its end, he sees the seagulls flying overhead, and he knows that his time in Middle-earth is short. He declares, "Alas for the gulls! No peace shall I have again under beech or under elm." The plight of the elves aligns very well with the Christian, and specifically Catholic, because Tolkien was a Catholic, idea of man's state after the fall. By all rights, mankind was designed to live in peace and company with God, as they were in the Garden of Eden. But humanity was sundered from God by sin, and Tolkien believed that that had had an impact on everything, especially our innate desires and the absolute inability of us to achieve them in our mortal lifetimes. Tolkien believed that as humans, it was built into us to seek perfect love, perfect relationships, perfect art, a perfect home, but that because of our fallen state, this was a longing that could not be satiated in our mortal lifetimes. But for those who are able to sail to the west, this longing could be satisfied. For the rest of us mortals, we are left here to yearn. To satisfy this longing, the mortals of Middle-earth are left either expressing this sorrow through art, through music, and through stories, or they're left to repress it, to brush off the Blessed Realm and Valinor as elvish myth and legend, not something that could ever really be reached. The hobbits find themselves entirely overwhelmed by just the concept of the ocean. They try not to look west or ponder the immensity of what may lie just over the hills. Most mortals are like the woman that Tolkien depicted in his poem, The Last Ship. In The Last Ship, he describes a beautiful maiden who goes out to the river just in time to watch the last elf boat pass out of her land. They call out to her, begging for her to join them, for there is one seat left on the boat for her, but she tells them that she was born Earth's daughter. It is not for her to pass out into the west. Thus, she must live out the rest of her days divided, happy with the beauty of the earth, but always knowing that there could have been something more. Most people in Middle-earth will never get the chance to voyage west. Most of them may never even really know where this sense of yearning and longing came from. But for very precious few, they are granted special dispensation to soothe this bone-deep wound. Frodo Baggins, injured to the soul as he is by facing the Wheel of Fire, can find no peace in the world, so he is granted special passage west. He is given Arwen's place on the boat. The dreamlike sequence is described. And the ship went out into the high sea and passed on into the west, until at last, on a night of rain, Frodo smelled a sweet fragrance on the air, and heard the sound of singing that came over the water. And then it seemed to him that, as in his dream in the house of Bombadil, the grey rain curtain turned all to silver glass, and was rolled back, and he beheld white shores, and beyond them a far green country under a swift sunrise. Something worth noting about Tolkien's depiction of the sea is that he rarely, if ever, actually has anything happen on the sea. These great voyages are never described in detail. He tends to glaze over the details of what is actually happening on these ships. There's no talk of ropes or of sails or any of that kind of thing. Rather, it's almost like we witness these voyages from the perspective of being on the shore and watching that ship skip across the horizon. And this was also how Tolkien tended to experience the ocean. He wasn't a sailor, he was never intimately involved in the processes of actually being on the sea. The most he was ever on the wide open sea were his trips across the Channel from England to France. That means that his view was from someone on the shore, looking out across the vastness of the ocean, and this was significant and impactful to him, but it meant that the actual ocean itself and the things that occurred upon it were inscrutable. In the Silmarillion, it was said of the ocean when it first came into being, "In water there lives yet the echo of the music of the Ainur, more than in any substance else that is in this earth." The music of the Ainur was the act of creation that wrote all of time and space into being, with its darkness and its light and all of the gray in between. And I would argue that one of the main characteristics of the Song of the Ainur, one of the things that echoes most deeply in the waters of Middle-earth, is resilience. For all of its crystalline, perfect beauty, the Song of the Ainur was remarkably pliable. The first main refrain was disrupted by the Evil One, trying to weave his own music at odds with that of Iluvatar, but it wasn't long before the symphony adapted, harmonizing, wrapping the discord in melody, enriching itself for the way that it had to grow. Just like a single drop of blood has no impact on the vastness of the ocean at large, so the ways of Iluvatar are so immense, so powerful, so wise, that no one person could think to disrupt them. No matter what happens to it, the sea will always be the sea. Water will always be water. It may be burnt into a cloud, it may freeze solid, but eventually it will melt, it will dissipate, and it will go back to the whole body of the ocean. Whether it's a placid creek winding sun-drenched through bent willows, or the scorch of rain becoming steam on the stones of Mount Doom, it is all within the Song of the Ainur, and it will all flow back to the sea in the end. The seas of Middle-earth are mystery, ambiguity, and potential. They are the thin, thin barrier between us and our imaginations, between reality and dreams. They are, in a way, fantasy itself. Tolkien went on one real sea voyage in his life, and in all likelihood he didn't remember any of it. He was 3 years old when his mother brought him from the place of his birth in South Africa over to England. And yet, this false memory, this idea that he had been one place and had then traveled to another across the sea, that was a lasting and very powerful memory. And I think that we all have these places that consist more of imagination than of fact. But that doesn't make us long for them any less, whether it's the good old days or how Halloween or Christmas felt to us when we were little kids. I was born in the United States, but my family moved to England when I was like 5 or 6 years old. So I had some memories of my childhood in the US, but nothing really tangible. Everything was kind of fuzzy. All I knew is that there was a place I had been, and there was a place that I now was, and there was a part of me that missed that place that I once was. And I very specifically remember my whole family going down to Gratham Water, which was the lake that we lived right by. And I looked across this big lake with all these waves and boats, and I saw a thin line of land on the other side. And I asked my parents if that was America. It wasn't. It was East Perry, but I still think that there is a part of the human imagination that will always look across the sea and wonder if the thing that is over there is the thing we miss, a better place, the place that we wish we were. And while it is a grief to think that we are separated from the place that we want to be by such a deep, such an insurmountable barrier, it's obviously a bit of a bittersweet grief, because it is a grief that has been reiterated again and again in all of the stories that we've told throughout history. Again and again, we write tales of fantastic voyages across new and strange seas. We tell tales of water being a giver of life, a destroyer and a purifier. And in all of this, the sea remains flexible, moving, fluid, and completely impossible to capture in a single metaphor. In 1914, sitting on a beach at Cornwall, Tolkien penned the following lines. In those eldest of the days I sat on the ruined margin of the deep-voiced echoing sea, whose roaring, foaming music crashed an endless cadency, on the land besieged forever in an aeon of assaults, and torn in towers and pinnacles, and caverned in great vaults. There is something very beautiful about knowing something completely, knowing it up and down and in and out to the very finest detail. But I think that people underestimate the importance of there being some things that we don't know, some things that we don't understand. I think that as humans, sometimes we need to be standing on the shore, looking out at something that is so huge, so fluid, so deep, that we will never fully comprehend it. We need to allow that mystery to wash over us, satisfied in that it remains unsolved. Let me know who your favorite seafaring character is in The Lord of the Rings, or what your favorite use of water by Tolkien is, because the concept of water gets used a lot in The Lord of the Rings, and I find that a lot of people don't talk about it. So I would be really curious to hear what you guys have to say. Give this video a like, and share it with your friend who you think is nerdy enough to really be intrigued by such a specific investigation as this one. And do consider subscribing if you want to come back every week for more deep dives about The Lord of the Rings, the art of storytelling, and the other stuff that I like to talk about. Thank you so much for joining me this week and every week, and I hope that you have a very happy, hobbity day.